Hello, everyone, and welcome to a conversation with a couple of great guys. They're going to give us some insight into talking about seed and science. I'm Sean Brook. I'm the president of Seed World Group, and very excited today to be joined by Kevin Falta, professor of molecular biology in Gainesville, Florida, and David Zaruk, professor at Odyssey University College in Brussels. So we're going to have a big chat here today, gentlemen. Are you guys up for it? Kevin?
Oh, sure. Let's go. We're very excited.
David's ready to go. Awesome. Good stuff, guys. So I have to come clean on something. I have a brother who is a professor at the University of Saskatchewan, and he has very pointedly told me that once professors get tenure, they can say whatever they want to say. Now, I suspect that the two of you have a slightly different take on that, but the reason I bring that up is because you guys are professors. You're encouraged to be brave. You're encouraged to be out there and sharing your ideas and your opinions. What is it in that discussion or that thinking that gives you, that empowers you to be able to do that? Kevin, you want to tackle that one first?
Well, it's very interesting that you would ask me that question. I'm a tenured professor who can't mention the name of the university I work for because they've told me do not talk about communication strategies and how it relates to agriculture. And it's because it brings a lot of fire to the university. It brings Freedom of Information Act requests by the dozens, expensive hassles, and frankly, universities are risk averse. They don't want people getting in a line of fire. I absolutely disagree with that. I think if we can't tell the truth as professors representing the public position, then who can? And I think it's a real scary time for us, but I keep doing it anyway because it's the right thing to do. And we need to be focusing more on how we can get our messages out there from an agricultural perspective, especially with regards to new technology.
Right. Well said. David, what's your take?
Well, in Europe, it's a bit different as well. I mean, we don't really talk about things like tenure. Most of us are civil servants or employees of the state. And unfortunately, I mean, my responsibility is to my students. And my management's responsibility is to the Minister of Education. And so we have completely different perspectives a lot of time. And I'm more concerned in making sure that I can inspire the next generation and have people thinking out there. I wish my management would do that sometimes.
Right. So who does it get left to tell this story then, David? Who has to stand up and have the bravery and the courage and the skill set to have these conversations about science and how that impacts in the seed industry?
More people. And that's the problem. I don't think there are enough people standing up to A, tell the story, and B, have the courage to stand up and to say to somebody else, you're wrong, or maybe you should read this, and this before you go out and try to influence public policy. Unfortunately, there aren't enough people out there. And Kevin, I don't know if you have this problem. I have people coming to me all the time saying, are there more people like you? Mm-hmm. Or where can I find more people like you who can do these things? And that's a very painful thing to hear from people when they say that, because it's not that hard. Right. Kevin,
is that something you come across?
Yeah, it is very much. And it's interesting. And it happens because scientists are skilled in the areas of science. And our system is selected for people who are excellent at writing grants, maybe teaching classes, who write scientific papers and do outstanding research. That's what we've selected for. We don't train people in effective science communication or public engagement. And we don't consider that to be part of the appointment. And the entire tenure and promotion system looks at engagement as a negative. It doesn't necessarily give you gold stars for going out and speaking with the public. Now, that's not true in our extension service, where engagement with the public is encouraged and is part of what we do. It's outstanding. But when it starts getting contentious, you see a lot of universities turn from it and even tell their faculty, hey, be quiet. That's happened at a number of universities in the last decade.
Right. And probably an ever-growing number as well, unfortunately. Right. So our mission today was to talk about how are we conveying the information about what's going on for seed. These are big conversations. They're ever growing in size because of who we're trying to persuade. in the seed industry, we're very good at talking in amongst ourselves. Boy, I can convince someone who agrees with me with just about everything, but try to convey new ideas to new audiences, and sometimes we either freeze or it just becomes antagonistic immediately. Do you guys have that one takeaway that serves you really well, that one little silver bullet that you keep in your gun to start a conversation on the right path? Kevin, you want to tackle that first?
3 words: help me understand. And when I have somebody who has serious questions about technology and seed or anything in plant biology, and maybe ideas which are completely wrong or contradictory to what we know, I ask first, help me understand. And I listen to where their fears come from. And when I understand that and I show them that I'm listening, it causes a level of engagement right there, and it starts to build trust. And then when I start talking about my credentials and what I know and the side that I come from, it has a more of a possibility of starting to resonate.
Interesting. David, what's your angle?
I've got 5 words. Let's look at the context. Usually when there's someone who will come to me with a claim or an issue or a disagreement, first thing I have to understand is, where is that person coming from? What does that person want? Particularly in a place of Brussels, where everyone has an interest that's trying to be expressed in some way, and trying to take information and turn it into something that's going to be to their benefit. So looking at the context, looking at the narrative, is this a person who's concerned about their personal health? Is this a person who's concerned about a type of farming that they want to promote? Is this a person being paid by somebody? And once we understand the context, then we can frame the debate. We can put the narrative is set, and we can put the stories into the right context. But the first thing we have to do in a situation like that is, look at who we're talking to. Am I talking to a student? Am I talking to a government official? Am I talking to a farmer? Am I talking to my sister-in-law? And the contexts are different.
Somebody once told me that in science communication, we have to think of The Simpsons. Both you guys familiar with The Simpsons?
Sure.
And with The Simpsons, it's if I was trying to convey an idea to The Simpsons, I can get very intelligent Lisa on side. I can get inquisitive or curious Marge on side. But what about that non-attention paying young man of Bart and that less than intelligent Homer? I have to convey to all 4 of them an idea. And I thought that was a really good tactic to think about, so that we don't mistake who we're talking to and when we're talking to them, and create a message that's for that specific audience. If I'm talking to Homer, I have to talk different than if I'm talking to Lisa.
I think I talk to Smithers far too frequently in my days. I don't know who your favorite character is there, Kevin.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
We've lost
Kevin,
already.
Kevin, you have to package it up, right? You have to package up your conversation in a specific way.
Actually, you do, but there's some things that just about everybody in that family can relate to. And if you can get to those kind of common ideas, that's the great starting point. When you look at it at the end of the day, but the differences between me and the folks who are, say, advocating against, say, genetic engineering or whatever, we're probably on the same page of 90% of issues, whether it's social issues, whether it's economic issues, whether it's environmental issues. We're very much in line. We just disagree on this one place where they've been poisoned with bad information. So I always start with those other issues. I'm in this for food security. I'm in this for the environment. I'm in this to protect farmers' interests. Those are the things I really care about. And then consumers having the best access to the best food in human history. Those are the things I care about, which are the same things they care about. Now we can start looking at the overlays of technology as to how they relate to those 4 areas. And I find that that's a good way to make a compelling argument, because it speaks to those individual interests.
You make that sound so easy, Kevin, and yet when I do it, I seem to get the hair on my neck up a little quicker than I want. Any tricks, David, on how to keep present in that conversation without sliding towards the, yeah, you're wrong, and here's why you're wrong kind of tone, even if we don't say it, but to avoid that tone? David, any thoughts?
I mean, anytime we communicate on an issue like this, it's emotional. And of course, key elements that come into play here, particular are benefits. What benefits me? What's in it for me? Is it worth me taking the risk? Quite clearly, we will take any risk if we see a benefit. So and we don't talk enough about the benefits. We don't talk about the amazing developments in farming and agriculture in the last 50 years.
Right.
And that, when we look at the developments, how now seeds are being able to be developed to address problems and increase yields while, increasing sustainable intensification practices. It's amazing. This story is amazing.
It is an amazing story. Kevin, any thoughts?
Well, I agree with that. I think that one other place that's really important is to get people to understand the threats to sustainable agriculture, and whether it's labor, climate, the new pests and pathogens. There's so many things that we can bring up to show them that there are legitimate threats that can, even in the industrialized world, limit our access to the foods we choose. And when you start talking about those threats and say, what solutions do you have? Let me tell you about mine. I think it really makes it easier to sell the technology.
That it make it more that compare and contrast concept. Yeah. I was on a panel discussion a number of years ago, and one of the people on the panel was a woman by the name of Crystal Mackay. She works for a company called Loft 32. And we were talking about communication of these technical ideas. And she told this quick story. She said, imagine, Sean, if you walked up your driveway and I was standing in your backyard and I was peeing in your well. And I'm peeing in your well and you see me and you're like, Crystal, what are you doing? I'm peeing in your well. But Sean, don't worry about it. It's like 1 part per million of pee in the water. There's deer running around. They're going to get pee in your water. There's bears. Don't worry about the pee. You are still going to say, stop peeing in my well. And she said, how do you think people react to GMO? And it was this kind of aha moment for me that they're not talking about a percentage of acceptability. They just don't want it. So when we get in, if that's the mindset that we're battling up against, guys, how do we get through that? Because it's not with more science, right? I think we can agree on that. It's more science. Beating them down is not going to get them there. What's that emotional story that you get to tell? Kevin?
Yeah, that's a really great point. Because it really reinforces what I am up against all the time. We talk about parts per million, parts per billion, parts per trillion. Who knows, right? It's 300 parts per billion is still not zero. And that's where we really blow it. The important part is going back to the idea of what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and that we have to sit down with somebody and show our mutual concern for a given agricultural issue, and then talk about the solutions. And when we start getting into parts per billion and things like that, we have to minimize it as best we can, that we're only applying 4 ounces of something per acre, at a time when it won't matter with residues on the plant. There's ways to minimize those concerns. And, if they're peeing in your well, maybe it's a really big, deep well, and that there is a dilution factor that realistically says, that it's not going to be a problem. And we can put filters in line before it hits your tap. There's a number of ways of mitigating the concerns that people have. That's what we have to focus on.
Right. Yeah, exactly. David, any thoughts?
By peeing in the well, the best way to say that is that your pee is actually something that's not natural, and my well is everything is natural in the way it should be. So we can begin to see how this conversation is definitely got some teeth. The interesting element that comes out is to think of how people are going to accept a problem and then realize the problem needs to be solved. We've just come out of 18 months of a serious problem. And once people identify that this is a problem, then, and you lock them down for a long enough period, they're willing to accept anyone who's going to come with a solution. And they're willing to accept any solution. And we haven't really felt like we've had much of a problem. We don't think there's a problem with the food chain. Everything's perfectly fine. Why do you want to change it? And so until people can understand that there is a problem, and I don't want to say we need to have a famine, or we need to have a serious problem with our food chain somewhere in order for people to realize that, but people are comfortable. And so they can expect to have pure water. They can expect to have, problem-free issues. And I think that's the point. When Kevin says he's trying to solve a problem, the other side has to understand, once again, understand the context. What is the problem? And can they understand that there is a problem that needs to be addressed? Often it's not my problem. It's your problem.
No. Well said. Gentlemen, I really do appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with me today. I hope and believe we will have this conversation again, and it'll just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.